Alrighty, so today what we're working on is a 2009 Chevy Suburban. We're going to be replacing the power steering pump on it. The reservoir has rotted. Don't know how much I can really fit in there to see. You can kind of see at the top how it's rusted, and then the bottom it's real rusted. So we're going to start working on that. First thing we're going to do is take the belt off. Tensioner is that far pulley, just loosen it and pop the belt this way. 15 millimeter. My hand in there a little. Pop the belt. Release the tensioner. Alrighty. Now the next thing that I have to do, ideally, is take this pulley off. It takes a special tool that goes on here and it presses it. This one's got a fair bit of rust on it, so I'm not real sure that it's going to come off. And I bought a new pulley just in case. This is the set that you need. It has a couple different collars and adapters and such. Mine is from Harbor Freight. Item 63068. It should work. So I'm going to try this. It's probably not going to work though, and I'll have to do it a different way. I bought a new pulley just in case, because this one's a lot better design anyways with these holes. You have to have the pulley off of the pump to actually unbolt the pump. Okay, so I've got my tool rigged up on here. Essentially, this is just a collar. Those two little like half things are underneath it. This is locking it in. Then I have to hold this and tighten this. It's going to screw that in, and this is pulling the pulley outward. That is, of course, if it works. If not, I have to go to plan B, which happens quite a bit on these, really. In this case, this pulley is coming off really well. I'm not used to that. It's still astounding me how well this is going. I've had this before where I have to have like 4 feet of cheater pipe. Pulley is off. Just show you guys as I take this apart because you couldn't really see me putting it on. This here is just a locking collar. It holds these in place. They're grooved out to grab the lip there. It's hard to see the lip, but there's a lip at this part and there's a lip on this. So the pulley's off. Now I can get the lines in the pump itself. So the pump itself is held on with this. There's another one down here that the camera's not quite picking up. Then I have the lines on the back, which is a little dark down there to pick up. I can show you on the new pump though. There's this one here, it's the low pressure feed, or low pressure. Show you, this one here is the low pressure, so the hose just goes on here and has a clamp. The other one's going to thread into right here. It's too dark and congested down there to actually show you while I'm doing that, but this is just going to unscrew. In fact, I have a new line because that line's rusted out. So essentially, that fitting there is just going to go in there. That's just a black plastic plug to keep it from getting any debris or dirt in it since it's new. So I'm going to go ahead and get that unhooked. And I'm replacing this line. And same thing, it's too congested and dark, I can't really show you. But this bolt here goes right down at the rack and pinion. There's a bolt in it and then it's just an O-ring connection. It'll pop out once that bolt is out. Back down here behind it, there's a bracket on the back of the power steering pump, and there's a bolt that goes through here into the block right there. You have to remove that or else the pump won't move. I already have this nut removed, and there's another one down there that you can't see yet. And then I have removed all 3 of the bolts from the front here. Probably easier to see without my flashlight, actually. But once again, there was a bolt here, here, and down here. On this one, they were all the same length, but always make sure to check to make sure that they are, because obviously if they are different lengths, they are like that for a reason. So my pump itself is loose now. Just be a matter of finagling it out of there. I can't actually get to the fitting on the back of it for that line yet, so I'm going to finagle it out and get that line off of there. So to make that easier to get out of there, I unbolted this bracket here. It's the one that the power steering pump bolts to. The alternator also bolts to it. It is held on with 4 of these bolts. Also, it is held on with 4 of these bolts. They're 15mm heads, at least on this one. Got those out of there. I have this just kind of supporting the weight. It's just hooked to that because I do still have the wires hooked up to it. I don't want anything yanking on those. But now that that's out of there, power steering pump moves all over, and I have all the room that I need for that. So I've got these units both up on the bench. Here's the old one and the new one. I'm just kind of comparing it, just making sure that, you know, all the bolts and the holes and stuff are in the same spot. And they are. This here hose, you don't actually have to take off of the vehicle under normal circumstances. I did, because of how it's so rusted down here. This part actually wasn't leaking yet, but it would have been soon. Like, it looks like it was, but it's just because of how the mess everywhere else. Because the reservoir itself is actually rotted through. And I don't know if it shows up on video, but yeah, it's actually, now I can't even do it unless I'm holding it. But that actually rattles when I spin it. So that was a bad, the pump was going out anyways, but the reservoir rotted out. I just bought a new pump with a reservoir already on it. I'm just gonna, since I took this one out with the line on it, I'm gonna put this one's new line on in the exact same configuration before I put it back on, just so it's the exact reverse of what I did. Alrighty, so it's off of there. I've got this line on in the exact same routing. It's not touching anything here. Might look like it is, but it's not. There's at least a 1/4 inch back there. I put this bracket on. Nothing's going to be in the way. I will say I found a difference in the pumps here. A very slight one, very easy to solve. Just essentially the stud on the bottom here. On the old one, it has a real tall nut on it. This one has a shorter nut. I'll tell you, it looks a lot like this one I pulled out. This was the top of the other one. But this nut part right here is a lot taller on the old one for down there. So to accommodate for it, I just put in a single 5/16 washer, and that lined it up fine. So we're going to get back on there. I'm going to put this line in the bottom and put that 8mm screw back in it, which holds that. Won't be able to film it because it won't really fit down there. Okay, so the pump is just kind of resting down there. I have the lines. Let's see if I can get the wires out of the way. Down here I have these lines back in. Slight revision to earlier. I had the alternator bracket kind of just bungee corded out of the way. I loosened it. I ended up removing it completely, which is real easy. There's just the positive cable with the 10mm and a single plug right here. And then the 4 bolts, and that just comes completely out. Just sits on the ground, looks like that. I did it so I could show you guys better, but it gives me so much room in here, I would absolutely recommend doing that. Just remember that if you do that, to unhook your battery, because if that positive touches anything, it's going to arc out. So now I'll shimmy the bracket back into here. The alternator bracket, that is. I'm going to go get those bungees again just to support the weight of that. Okay, these bungees are carrying a lot of the weight. I'm going to put the alternator bracket roughly back in place. And as I do so, I'm going to put the power steering pump also roughly back into place. Remember, it was a lot easier once I loosened this up to get the power steering pump where it went. So essentially, just kind of, and I'm going to grab one of each bolt. One for the power steering pump, one for the alternator bracket here. I always say that, start all bolts before you tighten any bolts. Okay, got one of them started. And while I was doing it, I realized that one of them started isn't going to do it. And I have to start another one into there too. Otherwise, it's just going to keep flopping around. Got those started. So I'm going to kind of position this and get one of the alternator bracket bolts started. I'm probably have my head right in y'all's way, but okay, that one's started. And I'm not going to plug in the alternator yet. I'm just making sure that those wires aren't getting pinched, and I'll get the rest of the bolts started. Okay, so I've done a couple of things since I had the camera in here last. Said I was starting all these bolts, including the power steering ones. I ended up starting all of them, getting everything situated, and once they were all started, I tightened them. Starting once the ones that hold the bracket, and I finished with the ones that hold the power steering pump, including the one back here behind it. It's a bolt that goes straight into the block. I think I showed it earlier. It's always good to start everything before you tighten anything, because if you tighten one, it might not be in the right spot in the other spot. You'll have some trouble. And I also slid this low pressure line on. It's just a, yeah, I can't get to actually show it. It is just a pinch clip though, so I pinched it, shoved the line back on. So next step's gonna be getting that pulley on, so I'll get my tool ready. So first thing to show is just which side is in and out on this. This side here that has this lipped part is going to be out, because that's what you grab when you're pulling the old one off. This side here is just smooth, doesn't really have anything. So that nub part goes out. Next thing is the shaft that it goes on down here is threaded on the inside. You have to find the right one of these adapters that actually fits it. You see one's missing, because I already have one in there. And then that same large puller that you used threads onto the other end. So then, put your pulley kind of down there over all that. And put the big nut on it. Tighten that all the way in, which is going to take a minute. It's a fairly long screw. I lied actually. That is not the way. It is the way, I just forgot to put something on there. And while unscrewing this, my adapter's coming out with it. I'm just gonna have to kind of prop you up here because I really need both my hands. And I have a little bearing thing that actually goes down here. So now, with that bearing in there, now this nut goes on it. You can start the pulley sometimes by just kind of tapping it with a hammer. I prefer not to though. I've seen it done. It doesn't really hurt anything, but now I have to find my sockets. And essentially we're operating the reverse. Last time we were holding the nut and tightening the screw. This time we're holding the screw and tightening the nut. First couple spins are probably going to be super easy. Okay, the pulley cannot be allowed to spin, or the tool just kind of slides with it. So I have my ratchet just kind of down there. There's not a lot of stress on it, and I'm holding the pulley and I'm tightening this nut to push the pulley onto it. And essentially you'll just do that. It will bottom out because when it's flush, you're at the right depth. So I've got that pulley on there nicely. I'm gonna go ahead and put the belt back on it now. A little bit hard to actually reach up into here, but honestly there are so many vehicles that are worse. Get your wrench on the tensioner. It's always easiest to slide it onto the idler pulley. That, kind of feel around on all the pulleys. Make sure that you're in all the grooves. Okay. And now that that's on, it's time to fill the system. I've left any caps on as long as I possibly could just to keep dirt from getting in there. I'll remove that and get some fluid in it. Alrighty, so the point that we're at right now, I have fluid in there. I actually filled it up probably about 15-20 minutes ago. I just kind of let it sit there for 15 or 20 minutes. A little bit of the air out of the lines will slowly bubble up sometimes, not really. But it makes me feel better, so I do it anyways. I've done kind of a visual inspection, just make sure nothing's gravity feeding and leaking out like that. So now I'm going to have to start it. As soon as I do, I'm going to come around here and just double check that my belt is routed correctly and that it's not wandering or ready to fall off or anything like that. During that time, you may hear a couple like groaning noises if the power steering has air in it, because it's likely to have air in it. In fact, it will. It's not likely, it's definite. There will be air. I'm going to do that. Now come back out here, check the fluid and such. And as long as it's not sucking it down too quickly, if it is, I'll fill it. I have the bottle right here. If not, then I'll start cycling the wheel back and forth just to help bleed any and all air out of the system. So I'm going to go fire it up. So I'm just kind of watching for those, and of course at the same time watching for any leaks that may have, because I did just have the system open, so it's very prone to any leaks. Not seeing any, so I'm going to go start turning the wheel back and forth to get some air out of all of it. Oh yeah, I got lots of air in it there. And I'm not going to bore all you guys with that. I'm just going to be doing that until the air quits coming out. It'll quit making noise, and it'll quit getting all foamy. Sometimes you can do it in a few minutes, sometimes it takes a very long time. So I'll come back when it's all good. Okay, and that's really all there is to it. Cycled it back and forth till the noises went away. I've also let it rest quite a few times, just to kind of let the air bubbles work their way out. It wouldn't surprise me if there was a little bit of a noise, you know, in the next couple days. Every once in a while. I made sure it's not just a constant thing. So we just kind of went through, made sure everything I took off has been addressed. You know, the clamps are on, bolts are in, stuff like that. Everything looks good. The belt was tracking nicely like it's supposed to. I unhooked the alternator, so of course I made sure that was charging. Caps on, full of fluid. So all in all, job done. So that's it. We have power steering back in that. Well, we had power steering before. It was just leaking fluid. So we have power steering and we have it holding its own fluid again. As always, thanks for watching the Grant Garage. Like and subscribe if you'd like to. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see next.